Objection to order. Chair recognizes Mr. Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Man, I love our chairman. I mean, people have called the chairman many things, different adjectives over the last 2 years, but I admire his courage. I mean, literally, as Donald Trump is running away from Project 2025, trying to put as much distance between him and Project 2025 because the American people know it's toxic, but not our chairman. No. Chairman, with all of his wisdom, he features Project 2025 in the hearing, one of our last hearings, right before the election. I mean, if the Trump campaign is listening, here you go, Project 2025 in a hearing. I'm sure they're real happy about that. But, Project 2025 wants to get rid of NOAA, wants to get rid of the National Weather Service, the people that tell you the weather and help us prepare for hurricanes. So I say that as a former director of emergency management for the state of Florida, for a Republican governor, actually, who responded to hurricanes. Maybe if once we get rid of it, if Project 2025 were to succeed, if Trump were to win, maybe we'll just do it with a magic 8-ball or maybe with a Ouija board, or maybe we'll do hurricane cones like President Trump did, right, where he just, circled in another state that wasn't in the cone. So maybe what we'll do is we'll do hurricane predictions, like maybe it'll go to Mississippi, maybe it'll go to North Carolina, or maybe it'll go to all three. Oh, look, I made a smiley face. Maybe that's how we'll do the weather. I could see it right now, right? Trump would come out and say, it's going to be raining cats and dogs today. Please don't eat them. Okay? But, the name of this committee today is Failures and Incompetencies. So let's talk about the big Knish, right? The chairman's failed impeachment. Let's remember, we misplaced an informant over a year ago, couldn't find him, didn't know where he went. Another informant was indicted for providing false information that came from Russian intelligence. We used a second informant who was turned out to be an indicted Chinese foreign agent. And to top it off, the chairman was like, who could we find to make it even better? Maybe we could get someone to testify from prison, which actually we did here on Zoom. Here is the chairman's 300-page book report on impeachment. He said in his release, it is the strongest case for impeachment of a sitting president the House of Representatives has ever investigated. Wow, that sounds pretty serious. So I want the chairman to show the American people that we didn't just waste millions of taxpayer dollars to issue this book report. Mr. Chairman, the speaker is watching. You could call for impeachment right now, right? We got a little bit of time left before the election. I mean, just ask the speaker. You could ask the speaker right now, or talk to him. Like, when are we going to schedule impeachment? Or is this just concepts of impeachment? Right? No? Okay. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think that the chairman titled this, and I love the title of today's hearing, right? A legacy of incompetence, consequences of the Biden-Harris administration policy failures. I made a couple of edits to the title of today. So the title, I think, really is a legacy of incompetence, consequences of the Comer chairmanship, okay? Because all we've had in this committee for 2 years is failure. Failed impeachment, failure on this gas stove nonsense, failure on all the Chinese COVID stuff. They did nothing with that COVID committee. It's all failure. The whole House, the whole 118th Congress is failure. They removed the speaker, right? Then they tried to remove a second speaker, right? That's really great for the American people, right? Then they impeached the cabinet secretary. That hadn't happened in 150 years. They've had multiple CRs fail, right? They can't even keep the government open without both speakers crawling to the Democrats to be the adults in the room to keep government opening. So, I mean, literally, if we're going to talk about failures and incompetencies, we should just look at what we've done here over the last 2 years. And I want to end with this. I mean, literally 2 weeks ago, right, all we heard was about what the Haitian people were doing in Springfield. But no, the chairman wanted to top that. He literally brought a witness who proffered in this committee that the Haitian people would have been better off had they stayed in slavery for several more decades. Mr. Chairman, I want to spare you the embarrassment. You should strike his words from the record. No, you stand by his comment that the Haitian people would have been better off in slavery for 30 more years? Or should we strike that from the record? I just want to spare you that embarrassment. Okay, so the
All right, your time's expired. Before I recognize Mr. Timmons, I would love to be a fly on the wall when you find out that Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential election and his son pled guilty for corruption.
Why
So
didn't you
Chair
impeach
now
him?
recognizes
Wait, why
Mr.
didn't you
Your
impeach him,
time's
Mr.
expired.
Chairman? Where's the impeachment vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Speaker, when's the impeachment vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, we have a 300-page book report, tens of millions of dollars.
Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons
Failed,
from South
folk,
Carolina.
fake impeachment.
Mr. Chairman, I'll begin by pointing out that Hunter Biden is going to be sentenced on December 16th.
Hunter Biden's not the
and
president.
I bet you money
Hey,
he's
Mr.
going to...
Timmons, you need to take your medication and leave. Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons.
Mr. Chairman, you're several decades older than me. We know who's taking more medication.
All right. Hunter...
Now yield to the ranking member for his opening remarks.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the witnesses for joining us today for one of the committee's last hearings in the 118th Congress with the extremely fitting title of A Legacy of Incompetence. The majority has assembled a group of leading Project 2025 intellectuals for a Project 2025 coming out party today. The witnesses will advertise their wares, which almost makes me a bit nostalgic, Mr. Chairman, for the days when our colleagues said that they were pursuing President Joe Biden for the worst presidential crime in American history, a crime which unfortunately they were never able to identify, but which they now appear to have dropped completely. So last week, my Democratic colleagues and I urged the chairman to hold a hearing on a real issue, on the gun violence epidemic that is ravaging American communities. This Congress, our colleagues have refused to hold a single hearing about a single mass shooting except for the one that involved former President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. The security of the former president is absolutely critical, but doesn't the rest of the country count too? Who's going to keep the rest of America safe from AR-15 attack by disturbed people loaded up on hate and conspiracy theory? Don't all Americans deserve to live free of gun violence? There have been more than 1,000 mass shootings defined as at least 4 people being shot that have claimed more than 1,000 lives since the start of this Congress. Just since the mass shooting and assassination attempt on the ex-president on July 13th, there have been more than 100 additional mass shootings that have claimed 88 more American lives. There were 4 other Americans who died that day on July 13th after the attack in Butler. And yet we're told by J.D. Vance that gun violence is a, quote, fact of life in America. C'est la vie. Nothing can be done about it. Of course, it's not a fact of life in England or France or Ireland or Canada or Japan or dozens of other countries. The NRA, the GOP, and the terribly weak Swiss cheese gun laws they insist upon have made gun violence a fact of death in America because they refuse to discuss the policy solutions favored by the vast majority of the American people of all parties: a universal violent criminal background check, red flag laws, a ban on the sale of AR-15s and other military-style assault weapons. So we have a rate of gun homicide 25 times higher than people living in Europe. And gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children and teenagers in the United States of America. Yet instead of holding a hearing on gun violence, we've convened a panel of 4 witnesses with deep ties to Project 2025, the mega manifesto for a second Trump term, so they can audition for Mr. Trump's approval and land a spot on his cabinet or sub-cabinet, a fate not necessarily to be envied if you talk to former Vice President Mike Pence or Trump's former Defense Secretary Mark Esper or his former National Security Advisor John Bolton or Cassidy Hutchinson or more than 100 other former Republican officials declaring Donald Trump completely unfit for office. But here we are with these Project 2025 luminaries who've taken up the challenge to set forth the agenda on how to take America backwards in every domain of public life. A recently disclosed email from Stephen Bradbury, one of Project 2025's leaders and Trump's former Secretary of Transportation, says that, quote, those who show real commitment and valuable contributions will be recognized by the leaders of the Project 2025, whose recommendations are likely to carry influence with the key personnel decision makers. And today, 2 of our witnesses, Mr. Carr and Ms. Sakura showed just that real commitment by authoring chapters of Project 2025. Press reports say Mr. Carr is vying to be Mr. Trump's FCC chairman, while Ms. Sakura apparently has her eye on becoming Mr. Trump's next EPA administrator. And I will stand corrected if you guys disclaim any ambitions for those offices, but that's what the press is reporting. The majority's other two witnesses also come to us from organizations that are right there on the advisory board of Project 2025. So we'll hear from them and we'll discuss how they intend to implement the extremist Project 2025 game plan in a hypothetical second administration for Donald Trump. It's a program that depends on sending in an army of Trump sycophants and loyalists to replace 50,000 professional civil servants. It's a program subordinating the people's government to big corporations, and it tramples the civil rights and liberties of women to abortion, birth control, and IVF, which the Republicans just voted against yesterday. It's a plan to upend democratic government as we know it, and it involves politicizing the federal workforce and gutting the professional civil service, weaponizing the Department of Justice against political rivals and the people, seizing political control of independent agencies like the Federal Reserve Board and the FCC, eliminating overtime pay for millions of workers, denying the climate crisis and pulling the plug on environmental progress, ending reproductive freedom in every state, federally surveilling births and abortions, legalizing discrimination against LGBTQ Americans, organizing mass deportations and detention camps, deploying the military to quash free speech and protests, eliminating Head Start and the Department of Education, dismantling NOAA and privatizing the National Wealth Service, limiting benefits for veterans. Now, Donald Trump has half-heartedly tried to distance himself from this toxic and increasingly unpopular agenda, but you need only to turn to the table of contents of this big book to realize it is the total product of Trump's inner circle. The MAGA Manifesto has 37 authors and contributors. Of those, 31 served in Trump's administration, 80%. Donald Trump has turned dodgy about his connection to Project 2025, despite the fact that he has praised it and commended its authors, because he knows it is way too extreme for the vast majority of the American people. The Biden-Harris administration has restored America's place as a global leader and led an economic recovery that is the envy of the rest of the world. Project 2025 wants to reverse all the progress we've made, strip Americans of basic fundamental rights and freedoms that we've had for decades, and create a federal workforce loyal only to Donald Trump and not to the Constitution of the United States. Today, Mr. Chairman, we're going to try to get to the details from these Project 2025 experts that you have kindly assembled for us. Let's get specific today, and let's see if the American people really want to follow the dark vision for America that Project 2025 has set forth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.